That really makes me very happy. It has always made me very happy. I am Zuill Bailey. I'm a cellist. I'm an artistic director. I'm a professor at UTEP for cello. I'm also the director of the Center for Arts Entrepreneurship here at UTEP. I had no idea at age 4, when I was put behind this little box, actually much smaller box at the time, that it would change my life. I had no idea that it would stop me in my tracks. My parents didn't either. I was taking piano lessons at the time. I was in sports, art. I was doing a lot of things. But something happened. Something changed inside of me, and it's called passion. I couldn't stop it. I was sick. The great Gregor Piatigorsky, Russian cellist, said, "You do not choose music, music chooses you." It is indeed a sickness. I tried from 4 to 11, lots of things, but nothing took the place of what this did for me. It made me complete. It gave me goosebumps. It made me safe, comfortable, confident. I didn't know why, because I was just a little kid. I never thought the fact that my parents were musicians and my sister was a violinist that was kind of arranged. But I enjoyed it. And it's always easy to look back on life and to kind of survey. But looking back from age 4 to 11, I was surrounded with my people, my family, my community, which happened to be musicians. And we all celebrated life together in wonderful ways. In fact, Amy Carter, President Carter's daughter, was in my Suzuki class in the Washington, D.C. area, along with 200 other people. But I noticed that she had a lot of people around her with earpieces in, so I noticed her immediately. So it was part of my childhood, but what it represented was something that was extraordinary and I could not put words on. At age 12, at my debut as a cellist, something else happened that was rather significant. It was the first time I remember waking up on stage playing. I was playing just like this, and I opened my eyes in a slow section of the Saint-Saëns Cello Concerto No. 1 with an orchestra. And I saw that most people in the audience had their eyes shut and they were smiling. And I realized that I had given them an escape from something, someplace. And it really took me by storm, because just saying the word coming awake was not a small statement. I remember for the first time walking off stage, and then something really interesting happened. A man came up to me and said, I'd never seen him before. I'd like to give you some advice, and I need you to really pay attention. If you can find what you love to do and make that what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I was 12. I looked down at the floor, and I said, well, he was gone. I said, there's only music. It's all I want. And from that day forward, I knew that the next mission of my life in my teens was to master this instrument, because I had the fire and no one was going to stop me. But I also realized at that point that the difference between work and hobby. You work to make money to then enjoy what you do for yourself after. And if I could somehow make my hobby my work, money would be irrelevant. So I began practicing like an Olympic athlete. No joke. I gave up everything. I gave up my social life. I gave up basically my family life, my friends. I never went to prom. I never went to homecoming. I didn't go out and hang out with my friends. I practiced 6-7 hours a day. I was on a regiment that you could not believe. Scales, etudes, training exercises to make sure that I could do this. I thought I had at 18. In fact, I had done something that was so kind of miraculous to my body. I had changed and morphed my body to make myself a cellist physically. I had asked for a large cello when I was 9 because I wanted a hard cello case and I wanted to be like my older friends. Through my growing spurts, I was stretching on the cello to try to reach what they could easily reach. What I didn't realize is that it was going to change my physique. At 18, I looked down as I was introduced to the bigger cellos of the world, like this one is, made in 1693. and I realized that my left hand was considerably larger than my right hand. That's going to play its card in a few minutes. I'll tell you about that story. But it showed how much work I had put into it. It showed me discipline, dedication, focus, things that are so rare today. But for those 8 years, I put the time in. I thought I had it all at 18, and then all of a sudden, some of my greatest musical heroes heard me play the cello. And they gave me fair warning. They said, "Congratulations, you can play the cello. Now, but what you're lacking is the human element. And you need to find that." I didn't know what that meant. I thought that just being a master of your instrument, which could take you everywhere you wish to go. It cracked me open slightly and made me realize that I needed to broaden. It made me start to kind of want to know what was next, and I'd never thought about it because obviously when you're in a regiment, you just follow the directions and you do that. Luckily, I went to Juilliard in New York City and studied with the legendary Joel Krosnick. And our lessons were basically therapy. We would play, but then he would say, "Put your cello down." He'd start asking me why. Why are you doing that? Where does that come from? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something and or it's the right time or the right place. This really disturbed me because I had not ever analyzed my cello playing. At this point, I'd also gone out in the world already and was beginning my travels. It's very difficult to be a performing musician, especially during those years, because every concert you played, you were reviewed. Someone criticized you in the paper the next day while you're trying to find yourself and grow. I got very disturbed by this because I became fragile, not the powerhouse I was in my teens where I was one-track mind. I started to see myself becoming weak and weaker, asking myself, who am I? Where do I come from? Obviously, I analyzed my parents, I analyzed my neighborhood, my environment, my teachers. But Itzhak Perlman, the great violinist, gave me some advice. At that very moment in my life, he said, look, when you read those reviews or you get an opinion, you have to first of all ask yourself who's saying it. And if you believe the good ones, where they say you're the god of the cello, then you have to believe the bad ones when they say you're the worst musician they've ever heard. What do you believe? And that changed me. What do I believe? What do I know? Let's just start with the basics. I come from an amazing family. They were musicians. They taught me a work ethic. The community from my childhood was intact. So obviously music brought people together. People went outside the Kennedy Center and came to me to showcase the love of music outside the concert hall. And otherwise I wouldn't have been that exposed to music and or those legendary figures. So I began changing my route on the road. I began trying to take the music to the people. In my 20s, on these travels, which I was gone a lot, I would be in a town for 3 days, and I would get off the plane and I'd ask a presenter, how can I help? They had no idea what that meant. I'm here for 3 days, I'm playing for 1 hour in 2 days. Where can I go and where can I bring music? A lot of things started to happen. So I went to schools, because that's what I knew, and played for high schoolers. And they couldn't believe that someone like them played the cello. That made it more accessible. Another thing happened in my 20s. I loved that, by the way. I loved the reaction because it also got them into the concert hall at the end of the week for the celebration, which made me realize that concerts or cultural events are basically just celebrations of life. We get together as human beings to celebrate being human. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I recognized that that's what it was, a rally. I was 29 years old, and I visited El Paso for a month in the summer of 2001. Stumbled across El Paso Pro Musica and had a really interesting dialogue where we had this kind of conversation. And Pro Musica asked me if I would stay to be their next artistic director. And I said, what does that mean? We'd like you to sculpt the cultural landscape of this entire region. All of a sudden, it wasn't cello anymore. All of a sudden, I started seeing community. All of a sudden, I started seeing the void of what I was trying to do in other places where I couldn't stay. I heard the phrase, the grass is greener where you water it. It made sense. I agreed. I accepted. That was 19 years ago. And that changed my life because I could see now dedication, all the same words that I learned when learning this instrument. Seeing things through, focus, passion, and I saw it working for this city. People began working together. People began celebrating together. And then life started really happening. My first son, born under duress at a hospital here in El Paso, taken immediately to the emergency room, intensive care. I couldn't touch him. He couldn't see me. But I realized maybe he could hear me. So I brought my cello into the intensive care unit at the El Paso hospital here, and I played for him. And that changed my life also and cracked me open. I began crying. I saw other parents crying. I saw doctors crying. But my son's heart rate went down, and his oxygen levels went up. And it broke my heart that I could give that to him. So I added that to the Pro Musica curriculum, that we have to go and prove that music heals, that music makes not only us obviously better, but internally as well. Then, 2 years later, or for the next 5 years actually, I was asked by my parents to go play for my grandmother, who was in her mid-90s at the time at the retirement center. So I would go to this retirement center and play for them. And they would all start crying as well and singing. And some of them hadn't muttered a word in years. Long story short, my grandmother lived till she was 106. Great depth of performances in retirement centers. I got to know an entire base of patrons that could no longer go to the concert hall, and music needed to be brought to them. Again, a forgotten people. It became very, very clear what my mission was by trying and also just basically being awake in life. My mission was a community rallier. My mission was to bring music to the people. It wasn't about the cello anymore. This was just my torch. But to actually connect with people. Connect with people. Good or bad. My mother always taught me, you can learn from someone even if it's what not to do. So I started listening to people. Larry King said something I never forgot. Someone asked him, why are you such a good interviewer? He said, well, I know what I know. I want to know what they know. And most people talk and talk and talk and don't listen and don't grow because of it. So I began changing my pattern that way. As you can see where this is going, basically the tools of music, the business of music, was really the business of me becoming a human being. And all the tools that gave me the power to function in society were learned through music and music education. And they were very highly personal, which made me different from other people. No competition. I didn't try to reinvent Yo-Yo Ma's career, or Rostropovich's career, or Itzhak Perlman's career. That's them. But what I felt every single day, and still feel to this very day, is a sense of accomplishment from day sunrise to sunset, of doing absolutely everything in my might to make a difference in this world with what I know when I know it. So again, the business of music is the business of life to me. And this is what we at UTEP try to inspire. Obviously, we can't forget the work ethic. We can't forget the passion if you're lucky to find it. There are so many different stages. You cannot skip any of them. If you do, you will find it will be detrimental later. So as a teacher at UTEP, as a guide for the Center of Entrepreneurship, I remind people by listening, where are you going? How are you going to get there? What tools are you drawing from? If you don't have those tools, you need to gain those tools in life to make it happen. Maybe it's actually not in music, because leadership and all of those descriptors that I just used obviously could be used for athletics, business, architecture, medicine. And it was just brought to my attention recently in a very interesting way how correct my instincts are. So I was lucky enough, well, I actually asked while I was in the San Francisco area to play in San Quentin Prison this past spring. You might know San Quentin Prison. That's where Johnny Cash did his legendary concert. I walked in there with my 326-year-old cello. Inmates all came in to a cello concert. I began playing something very similar to what I played for you. After I finished, I looked up and I saw a gentleman in the back, an inmate, visibly crying, holding his face. I was very uncomfortable. I wanted to say, well, you know, it's every musician's dream to play for a captive audience, right? But I felt that was inappropriate. So I kind of sat there in silence, remembering the Larry King lesson. And he looked up, an inmate handed him a tissue. He stood up, told me his name, told me his number. And he said, "Sir, I haven't cried in 26 years, and I've been in this place for 26 years, and I don't know what's happening to me, and I want you to tell me what." Obviously, I knew the situation. I didn't know what he had done, but something was happening right at that moment. My first instinct, and I said it because instincts sometimes work, was, you're not alone. Music makes us feel different things at different times, even if it's the same music. But it reminds us we're alive. By the way, I asked all the other inmates, what's the opposite of love? You would have been shocked at the shout of the word hate. I certainly was. And I said, no. The opposite of love is indifference. Hate is an emotion. Love is an emotion. Sadness is an emotion. Thoughtfulness. All of these are emotions that make us vibrate as human beings. And for whatever reason, the sound of this cello and this moment in time has awoken someone. And I looked at the gentleman and I said, so it reminds us we're human, welcome back. I said, because being neutral and being numb, whether you're in San Quentin or a passenger in life, is not a good place to be. And to me, music reminds me daily to vibrate and to make a difference in this world. And again, the business of music, the business of you, the business of life is human relations and how we connect with each other and the tools we have to do it. And find it in any way you can and just be you. Every morning, I start with one piece of music. It makes me feel like I can be me. It's become one of the most popular pieces in the cello literature. It's by Johann Sebastian Bach. Just to put in perspective, Johann Sebastian Bach was born in 1685. This cello was born when Bach was 8 in 1693. This was his first attempt at writing for the cello. This is Prelude number 1 in G major. And thank you so much for supporting TED, UTEP, and me on this wonderful morning.
Thank you.